Snow fell like ash that morning, gray and heavy. It covered the charred skeleton of the homestead, as if trying to bury the memory of what had happened there. But no snow could ever soften the jagged outline of grief, not when Clara McCall was still kneeling in it, her knees frozen to the ground, her shawl stiff with dried blood that wasn't hers. Her arms hung loose at her sides, trembling, as if her body still hadn't caught up with the horror. 2 mounds had been hastily dug beneath the twisted remains of the split-rail fence. 2 crosses, crooked and burned at the tips, marked the graves. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. Her lips were cracked, her hair matted, her blue eyes ringed in red. She stared at the graves like a statue cracked by time. Footsteps approached. 4 riders. She heard the creak of saddles and snorting horses before she registered the voices. There she is. She's still alive? She's not right in the head. The men dismounted, her husband's brothers. The McCall name dripped off them like grease from an overcooked steak. Entitled, angry, cruel beneath that polished frontier charm. The eldest, Caleb, took off his hat as if mourning, but his words didn't match the gesture. "This land's cursed now," he said, looking around. "A woman alone invites trouble, we told you." Clara still didn't look up. "You weren't here," she said finally, her voice hoarse. "You didn't see them." Caleb's face twisted. "Don't go putting this on us. You knew better than to send your husband riding north with winter coming. You should have kept to the settlement. They had guns. They came at night. They laughed when they shot them." Her throat caught. They laughed. The youngest brother spat into the snow. "Best we burn what's left and move on. The homestead's no good now. Hell, might sell the land." Clara blinked, slow and cold. "You'd sell the land your brother built?" "No," Caleb corrected. "The land our father built. My brother just died trying to tame it." He paused. "You're not welcome in town, Clara. Folks say you're cursed. Say you brought this on yourself." She said nothing. She already knew what was coming. "We're taking the horses," Caleb said. "And the wagon. You'll need to find someplace else to, well, to do whatever it is you think you're doing out here." The other 2 men began unhitching the animals. Clara rose slowly, one hand clutching the small locket she hadn't let go of since dawn. Inside the locket were 2 tiny portraits, her son and daughter, painted in ink and faith, their faces blurred now by sweat and snow. She didn't argue. What was the point? They left without another word, the wagon creaking over frozen ruts, vanishing into gray haze like ghosts who'd stolen the last warmth she had. That night, she dug her fingers into the snow, trying to reach the earth beneath it. Her breath came out in ragged gasps. The wind screamed across the prairie. The world had moved on, left her behind in the ashes. Somewhere in the distance, a wolf howled. Clara stood, not because she had strength, but because she had nothing else to do but walk. She wrapped the blood-stained shawl tighter around her shoulders and stepped away from the ruins, not once looking back. There was no more shelter, no more firewood, no more food, just an empty sky and the long white sprawl of winter. She walked, through the night, through pain that clawed up her legs, through memories that stabbed deeper than any knife. She didn't pray. She didn't beg. She didn't whisper names into the wind. Her heart was a locked box now, sealed shut so the cold wouldn't break what little was left inside. By the second morning, the world had gone strange. Trees bent sideways in her vision. The snow beneath her turned a dull gray. She thought she saw her daughter walking ahead of her in the storm, hair bouncing, arms outstretched. She reached for her, then collapsed. Her breath slowed. Her fingers curled inward. Her body accepted the cold like an old friend. And yet, just before the dark swallowed her completely, there were voices, not English, low, rhythmic, a language that moved like smoke. Then warmth, a strong grip under her arms, the smell of leather and wood smoke. Then nothing. She woke slowly, unsure she was alive or just dreaming better than usual. She was lying on thick furs inside a rounded structure made of animal hides. A fire crackled in the center. Her hands were wrapped in cloth. Her lips were damp. A carved wooden cup rested beside her, smelling of herbs and something bitter. The man sitting across from her was not white. He wore a bone necklace. His hair was long black and tied with red thread. His eyes were sharp but unreadable. When she stirred, he didn't speak. Just passed her the cup. She took it with shaking hands. Sioux, she rasped. He said nothing. Her voice cracked. My name is Clara. Still no reply, but his gaze never left hers. A woman entered, older, with braided silver hair and calm eyes. She placed a hand on Clara's forehead, then spoke something to the man. He nodded once, then rose and stepped outside. Clara drank the bitter brew, coughing slightly. Days passed in that teepee. She said little. They asked nothing. She watched the man from afar. Others came and went, always glancing at her like she was something between a curiosity and a threat. She learned the man's name only when a child ran past and shouted it with laughter. Sioux, horse. Something about the way they said it made her think he wasn't just any warrior. He was someone they trusted, but he rarely spoke, only watched her like he was waiting for something she hadn't yet decided to say. On the fifth night, a snowstorm slammed against the hides like fists. Clara stood near the fire, arms folded. Sioux entered, his coat dusted white. Their eyes met. She hesitated, then asked, Why did you save me? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he removed his coat, hung it by the fire, and sat beside her. Only then did he speak, because no one saved mine. And in that moment, Clara knew. She was no longer alone in her grief. They were two shadows from different worlds, both marked by loss, both still breathing. Somehow, the storm raged outside, but inside the fire crackled, steady and defiant. And Clara, forsaken, broken, reborn in frost, closed her eyes and felt the wind whisper something she hadn't heard in weeks. Hope! Something had begun, and it would not be buried in snow. Clara's strength returned in pieces, like shards of ice melting beneath spring sun. Some days she could stand, other days she barely sat upright. But even when her legs trembled and her hands refused to obey, her eyes stayed sharp, watching, measuring. She wasn't the only one watching. Sioux, the Sioux warrior who had pulled her from death, observed her with the quiet stillness of a mountain cat, always nearby, always silent. He didn't hover. He studied, like a man who had seen too many die to place trust quickly again. Clara noticed the scars along his neck, old, faded, claw-like, not from battle, but something else, perhaps the kind of wound that didn't bleed from the flesh. The village itself pulsed with a rhythm she couldn't name. Teepees stood like pale sentinels in the snow. Smoke curled upward in gentle plumes. Children darted between hides and sleds, laughter slicing the cold. Women sewed, tended fires, and threw occasional glances in Clara's direction, some curious, some wary. She knew she didn't belong, yet she was still here. On her seventh day among them, a boy wandered too close to the fire, catching the hem of his tunic. Clara lunged forward, swatting the flames with her hands. By the time the boy's mother arrived, Clara's palms were scorching red, but the child unharmed. For the first time, someone smiled at her. Later that evening, Sioux approached, not with words, but with a small clay bowl of crushed root and thick salve. He took her hands without asking and began to apply the ointment. She flinched. It wasn't pain. It was a gentleness that scared her. You don't speak much, she said softly. You speak enough for two, he replied without looking up. The edge of a smile touched her lips. So you can talk. Sioux didn't smile, but something in his gaze warmed. I didn't think I'd live, she admitted, watching the fire. He didn't respond. Why did you really save me? He was quiet for so long she thought he'd ignore her again. Then he said, because grief alone can kill faster than any bullet. Their eyes met. She said nothing more that night, but something had shifted. In the days that followed, Sioux began to teach her small things. How to wrap rawhide, how to tie a winter knot, how to walk with soft steps across packed snow. He didn't ask why she wanted to learn. She didn't explain, because both of them already knew. Clara began to regain weight color, and even, on rare occasions, a laugh. One cold morning, she tried her hand at throwing a hatchet into a tree stump. It bounced off and landed squarely on her foot. She cursed loud enough to make the nearby dogs scatter. From across the clearing, a teenage girl with 2 long braids burst out laughing. "She fights trees now," the girl shouted in Lakota-accented English. Maybe tomorrow she would challenge a snowflake. Clara stood, red-faced, and limped away. That night, the same girl brought her smoked fish in a comb, dropped them wordlessly, and walked off. Affection here came not in grand gestures, but in offerings and actions. The Sioux did not ask for backstories. They waited to see the truth of a person in how they acted. Clara respected that, but the past still hunted her in dreams. The faces of her children rose from the firelight. The laughter of the killers haunted her every step. She knew the world outside the sanctuary hadn't changed. The men who destroyed her life still walked free, and she couldn't hide forever. The chance to stop hiding came faster than expected. It began with a scream, then shouts, then the thunder of hooves. Clara rushed from her tent, her half-braided hair whipping in the wind. A small group of men on horseback had breached the edge of the village. Outlaws, armed and filthy, laughing as they tried to scatter the horses penned at the outskirts. Tusunk appeared like smoke. He said no words, issued no commands. He just moved with purpose, with fury. The warriors followed. Clara didn't think. She ran toward the commotion. Her feet slipped, but she caught herself. One of the outlaws raised a rifle toward a young boy trying to flee with a pony. Clara didn't scream. She grabbed a stone from the snow and flung it hard. It struck the man square on the cheek. He turned, startled, and just as he did, a spear tore through his shoulder. Chaos erupted. The outlaws tried to retreat, but the warriors surrounded them like the tide. No mercy, only silence and precision. Clara ducked behind a tree, heart hammering, until the last of the invaders was dragged away, groaning. The next morning, Clara found Tusunk by the river, skinning a rabbit. "You fight without training," he said, not looking up. "Was I supposed to wait for a pamphlet?" she replied. He smirked, barely. "You have anger. That's dangerous." "I have memory," she said, "and they still breathe." That was the first time she saw his gaze truly shift, from guarded to sharp, from sympathetic to alert. He stood, wiping blood off his blade. "Who did it?" Clara didn't answer immediately. The wind rattled the trees. The smell of pine and smoke curled around them. 3 men, maybe 4, broad hats, laughs like broken bones. They rode in with red sashes and left my babies dead. Tusunk stared at her. "Where?" "Near Black Ridge, 2 days west." He nodded once. Then, quietly, "I lost a wife, a son, killed by men who wore the same sashes, same colors." Their pain overlapped like shadows at dusk. Neither spoke again. But by nightfall, Clara found a rifle leaning outside her tent. Polished, loaded, heavy. There was a note in carefully scratched English. "You are not helpless. Don't forget that." The next morning, Clara asked for a horse. No one stopped her, not because they trusted her completely, but because they understood what it meant to bury someone you love and still want to keep breathing. As she rode to the outskirts, Tusunk watched from her eyes. He didn't wave, but she saw the way his hand stayed near his blade, ready, as if he already knew he'd follow. The past was calling. And this time, Clara wouldn't run from it. She would answer. The plains rolled out before Clara like a frozen sea, treacherous and silent. Her breath steamed through the scarf Tusunk had given her. She tightened the reins and leaned into the wind. Each hoofbeat beneath her felt like a heartbeat she wasn't sure she still owned. They'd taken everything. Her children, her home, her place in the world. And they'd laughed. That was the part that stuck in her ribs like a blade. They had laughed. She saw it in her dreams, heard it between each beat of silence in the teepee. The kind of laughter only cruel men could shape. The sound that made her want to bury bullets deep in their chests. Not out of vengeance alone, but to silence that sound forever. She and Sunk rode low through a snow-flattened valley, cloaked in wolf furs in the hush of nightfall. They had tracked the men for 3 days. A trader outside Fort Killian had remembered their faces, for white men drunk loud and bragging about settler kills. The one with the yellow teeth said he shot the boy right between the eyes. The trader said, laughed so hard he choked on his whiskey. Clara hadn't blinked. She thanked the man and walked out without a word. Sunk had said nothing, either. He simply loaded extra rounds into her saddlebag. That night, she didn't sleep. She stared at the stars until her eyes burned. By dawn, they'd found the trail, a narrow set of tracks leading toward an abandoned relay station once used by mail riders. Now it housed outlaws and worse. They camped in a ravine above the ridge, where the smoke from a cook fire marked the outlaws' position. Clara peered through the brush. 4 men, one whittling, one spitting into the fire, 2 throwing cards into the dirt like nothing in the world could touch them. Then came the laughter. Clara's stomach turned to stone. She counted them again. There, at the far side, sat the yellow-toothed bastard. She'd never forget that face. He was smaller than she remembered, older maybe, but evil didn't wrinkle. It rotted. I want the one with the teeth, she whispered. Sunk, lying beside her in the snow, nodded once. Then he is yours. They waited until dusk. Wind howled. The snow thickened. Shadows stretched across the basin, cloaking their approach. Clara's fingers trembled, not from cold, but from the quiet rage boiling just beneath her skin. Sunk placed a hand on her shoulder before they moved. Once it starts, it does not stop. She met his eyes. I don't want it to stop. Then they moved. Fast. Low. 2 shadows where there should have been none. Sunk struck first, an arrow through the throat of the lookout. No scream, just the collapse of a body into slush. Clara advanced on the camp, rifle raised. 1 man reached for his pistol, too slow. She shot him through the chest, then pivoted and dropped behind a woodpile. Gunfire erupted. Flames kicked up. A 3rd outlaw shouted, ran for the horses, and was met by Sunk's tomahawk mid-charge. He crumpled in the snow like a sack of corn. 1 left. Yellow teeth. He scrambled backward, hands up, pistol falling from his grip. Clara stepped into the firelight. His eyes widened. You, he started. She shot the ground at his feet. Get on your knees. He obeyed, mumbling. Didn't know, didn't mean to woman, it was just... You laughed, she said, leveling the rifle at his face. He whimpered. I was drunk. We thought it was funny. Just the settlers' brats. People die all the time, right? Ain't like they were my kids. She shot him. Not in the head. Not yet. His thigh burst in red. He screamed. You looked my boy in the eyes and laughed before you shot him, she said coldly. That sound, I hear it every night. He tried to crawl. She stepped on his back. I begged you, she whispered. I beg you not to hurt them. You laughed. Sunk stood silently behind her, arms folded, face unreadable. Clara raised the rifle again. No more laughter. The second shot silenced him. When it was done, the fire hissed. Snow fell like ash again. She sat down beside the flames, heart pounding. Her hands were steady. Sunk didn't speak. He simply sat across from her, watching, waiting. I thought I'd feel better, she murmured. But I don't. He nodded. Killing doesn't bring peace. It just clears the way for it. They buried the bodies far from the camp, left no markers. At sunrise, Clara found an old saddlebag in the outlaw camp. Inside was her daughter's wooden doll, scorched, chipped, but unmistakable. She held it like a heartbeat. That night, back at their small camp, Clara couldn't sleep. She sat by the fire, clutching the doll, watching the sparks twist into the sky. Sunk joined her, quiet as ever. I wanted justice, she said. You found truth, he replied. She looked at him. What do I do with it now? He didn't answer right away. Then, you carry it, until it's light enough to set down. They sat in silence. Then Sunk asked something he never had before. Will you go back? To what? She asked. There's nothing left. You could stay. Clara looked into the fire. Would I be welcome? Not as a guest, he said. As family. Her chest tightened. I don't know who I am anymore, she whispered. He leaned forward. You are a mother who walked through fire. A woman who stood when others ran. That is enough. The flames cracked, and in that moment, the wind didn't howl. It hummed, like it was listening, like it had carried her pain far enough. The snow had begun to melt, leaving behind patches of raw earth like old scars on the prairie's skin. Spring approached slowly in this part of the frontier, hesitant, fragile. But it came nonetheless, just as Clara had. They returned to the site of the homestead, without speaking. No one followed them. No one needed to. It was something Clara had to do alone, and Sioux understood that in the way only someone who had buried his own life before could. The burnt ruins were still there. Charred beams and rusted nails poked from the earth like broken ribs. The crosses marking her children's graves still stood, leaning slightly, their edges wind-worn but untouched. She dismounted, her knees weak, her throat closed. Sioux stayed with the horses. He didn't move, didn't intrude. His silence was the greatest kindness he could offer. Clara knelt before the graves. No words came. None needed to. She removed the small doll from her satchel, wiped it clean with a trembling hand, and placed it between the two wooden markers. Then she sat back, her palms pressed to the cold earth. Her eyes stung, but she didn't cry. The tears had been burned out of her long ago. What remained was something quieter, deeper, a stillness she hadn't known since the day the laughter started. She whispered their names into the breeze. A moment later, the wind picked up, curling around her like a shawl. It whistled through the broken timbers, through the bare branches, across her cheek like a kiss from something beyond memory. For the first time, she felt them not as ghosts, but as part of her. The wind knew their names now, and it would carry them where the cruel could never reach again. Behind her, Sioux shifted in the saddle, eyes scanning the horizon, always watching, always listening. They didn't stay long. The prairie had already taken what it wanted. What it hadn't taken was Clara. She rode back beside him in silence, her hands steadier on the reins. By the time they returned to the Sioux village, the thaw had begun in earnest. Rivers cracked open, birds circled overhead. Smoke from teepees curled gently into a sky no longer gray, but pale blue with promise. She unpacked slowly, one item at a time, placing each thing with care. She didn't ask to stay. She simply stayed. No one objected. The children ran past her, without fear now. The women offered her roots and herbs without hesitation. Even the old medicine man nodded at her once, his silence louder than 1,000 words. Sioux built her a new shelter beside his, not inside his, beside, a line drawn in respect, not distance. Sometimes they shared meals, sometimes they rode together, but they never spoke of the past unless the fire was low and the night was deep. On one such night, Sioux sharpened a blade while she mended a torn shirt. You never told me your children's names, he said quietly. She paused, thread between her fingers. Sarah and Eli. He repeated them softly, as though carving them into memory. They were brave, he added. She smiled faintly. They were stubborn, like their mother. He glanced up. That is not an insult. A silence settled between them. Not uncomfortable, just deep. Do you think the wind forgets? She asked, not looking up. No, he said. It remembers everything, especially those who speak softly. She set down the cloth. What did the wind say when your son died? Sioux was quiet a long time. It said nothing, he said at last, because I refused to listen. Clara nodded. I think I did too. Another silence. Then he spoke again, lower this time. But I heard it the day I carried you from the snow. It called you by name. She looked at him, heart suddenly beating faster. What name? He shrugged. Not one I knew then, but one I've learned. She opened her mouth to speak, but a shout interrupted them. A rider burst into the village, shouting something in Lakota, urgent, breathless. Sioux rose instantly, blade still in hand. Clara stood too. "Bandits," he said, "riding through nearby hunting grounds. Could be more of the same kind." Clara didn't hesitate. She grabbed her rifle. Sunk raised a brow. "You don't need to come." "I need to," she said. They rode, fast and hard through the thawing terrain. The horses kicked up clods of half-frozen dirt. The wind screamed past them. Clara felt alive, not just surviving, but choosing to fight, to protect. They caught the raiders near a ravine, dragging a young Sioux woman by her hair, laughing the same way Clara remembered. Sunk didn't wait for a plan. He rode into them like a storm. Clara followed, rifle crackling like thunder. The bandits scattered. Clara dropped one to the chest, wheeled her horse, and screamed the kind of sound she thought had died in her with the winter. One of fury, one of vengeance, one of freedom. Another man came at her with a blade. She ducked, swung her rifle, and cracked his skull clean. When the dust settled, for men lay dead, the girl was saved, and Clara stood, panting, blood on her knuckles, breath ragged. Sunk came beside her, silent as always. But this time, she spoke first. "I used to think grief would kill me." He looked at her, and now... She stared out at the field of bodies. "Now I know it just had to burn everything I wasn't." He said nothing. He didn't need to. That night, back at the village, the council gathered. Clara stood beside Sunk. No longer the settler widow, no longer the broken one. Just Clara, whole in a way no one could see, but everyone could feel. The oldest woman stepped forward, painted a line across Clara's cheek, and said in her language, "The wind has carried you far. Now it carries you home." A new teepee was raised that spring. 2 fires were lit in front of it, one for Clara, one for Sunk. But in time, only one fire remained. It didn't need to be explained. The prairie remembered. The wind spoke. And when it did, it carried the name of a woman once broken by sorrow, now reborn in flame, snow, and silence. She had buried her pain. Now she walked with it, not behind her, beside her, a shadow, a strength. And somewhere in the breeze, her children laughed again, not cruelly, but gently. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.